I've come back. Back to the world.
6 months since it was announced, and with it now in my hands, and I'm still squeeing inside as I never, ever expected this. Hello everyone, I'm Des Shinta, and 5 years ago, I began the .hack retrospective. My motivation for such simply was, I was a huge fan of the franchise, and in 2012 it had pretty much died. Guilty Dragon was teased as in the works, and Beyond the World had premiered to close the storyline, with invasive, awful content taking its ideas, like Sword Art Online, becoming prominent, while asserting themselves as superior, which they were not. Many of these similar in-the-game series, while not all bad and I have liked others, lacked ideas and elements prominent in .hack, which has done more with the storytelling medium of gaming and interactions in cyberspace than any other, in many differing ways at that. And the morals and intents at its center, to not vilify online gamers or make them uber-perfect self-inserts, but use this setting as a way to resolve crises of life by giving an outlet to find friendships and support, were things that I and many others experienced in modern times, but were first predicted through this series. And the .hack GU game trilogy of Rebirth, Reminisce, and Redemption was always what I considered the culmination and climax of that storytelling to its absolute best form. It really was one of the best games on the PS2, that sadly, due to it being released after the PS3, and Bandai of America not doing much to market it, well, most Westerners never even heard of it, despite it being a massive success in Japan. I had hoped for years that Cyberconnect would get all 7 of the imported games up on the PSN, or even Steam, for anyone to be able to play them, and it had become near impossible to find the franchise's content. But I never expected Cyberconnect to do a full-on remaster of what I feel is their best game, and my favorite game of all time, and add extra content into it as they have with this collection. Let's get this out of the way. I am not discussing .hack GU Volume 4 Reconnection in this video. While I will give some initial thoughts near the end, I am delaying any in-depth recap and analysis until early 2018. I don't have the time to do it right this month, and would rather not rush writing a script. Moreover, the game just released. It is beyond rude to spoil that for people both new and old to the franchise, and just telling everyone outright would hurt its sales if that's all they were interested in. And that's something I don't want to happen, not only because I love .hack, but I was also contacted by a representative of Cyberconnect themselves to see if I was interested in promoting it. I already was going to, as I love .hack and wanted to promote it regardless, but I was immensely honored for the opportunity. Additionally, I was not paid to make this video, and as you see in the email, I was not supplied a review copy as this request did not come through Namco Bandai, and I retain that my thoughts, opinions, and criticisms are my own, and not a reflection of any other entity or corporation. And now, a dramatic reenactment for how I felt upon receiving an email from one of my favorite game companies, and them complimenting my work. With that done, let's get a primer on this game for anyone that hasn't played it or seen the 22 videos I've already done. Link in the description if you want to take the longer take. Some spoilers ahead. .hack GU is the story of Ryo Misaki, previously the player behind Sora from .hack Sign, who has re-entered the MMORPG The World in its Revision 2 incarnation as the character of Haseo. After being attacked by player killers on his first day, he comes into consort and camaraderie with members of the guild The Twilight Brigade, in specific their members Ovan and Shino. But after Ovan disappears, Shino is attacked by another player killer, and rendered comatose due to the actions of an abnormality in the game, later revealed to be called Ida, an artificial intelligence data anomaly. Desperate to uncover the cause and wake her up, as no one else seems to care or to endeavor to do so, Haseo takes on the identity of the Terror of Death, a player-killer-killer, who hunts down those who prey on other gamers in hopes of finding the one responsible, the legendary player-killer Tri-Edge, only for that to lead to nothing. After battling a recreation of the hero from the original .hack games, Azure Kite, he's reduced to level 1, and must find strength and power again to find and face Tri-Edge, who he's mistaken Azure Kite as he's forced into association with those who have no stake in his self-taken mission, while also attempting to avoid every player killer he's ever pissed off, and the machinations of others seeking to manipulate the world R2 and the power that left Shino comatose for their own designs. And during this, he meets a girl who looks just like Shino, which forces him to face the feelings of loss he's been trying to run away from that have left him trapped in a self-destructive cycle, which ultimately leads him discovering an aspect of himself sleeping within that may be the key to what he desires, but one which was only a source of torment previously, as he has no memory of the time when he was Sora, and thus has no knowledge that the one he calls upon previously used him as its own doll.
I have found you!
I'm right here! Sky!
And that's just telling of the first few hours of the first volume. If you want a bigger picture overall of the grand story arc of this game, well, as I discussed earlier in 2017, it's pretty much Persona 4, except GU released before Persona 4, and its events take place in an MMORPG instead of Inaba. Hell, Yuri Lowenthal's character in both games possess the same developmental arc.
I am a shadow, the true self. I'll crush everything that bores me, starting with you.
As Haseo's character arc overall is one matching the Kubler-Ross model, more known as the cycle of loss and grief, which each stage of the arc, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance, seen throughout the storyline in the differing ways the character is shown as acting.
When you lose a passion that was too intense, how do you fill the void of powerlessness it leaves behind?
Back then, I didn't even try to fill that hole. All I did was run. I think I'm better now than I used to be. But I'm still no good when it comes to thinking about voids and feelings of powerlessness and stuff like that. I guess that's why I'm always screwing up, and why everyone is always getting pissed at me. But you know, this is the only way I know how to live my life.
And it's an ongoing and dynamic one as well. The Haseo seen at the end of the series is a vastly different person than he started out as, making him the character with the most development in the entire franchise. Thus, if you find you dislike the guy early on in the game, that's how you're expected to feel, as much of the first volume, Rebirth, while showing he has had legitimate reasons to be the way he was, is nonetheless tearing down the mannerisms and self-justification born of his isolation, forcing him to see what he's doing and how close he is to becoming everything he hates while trapped in an amalgam of the rage and bargaining stages. The second volume, Reminisce, thus making him reflect on everything he's done after his rage is gone, and not like who he's been, and begins to make up for his mistakes amidst a greater story theme of depression and dependence. And finally, Redemption, making him reach the acceptance stage as he moves beyond them.
I won't go back to being the terror of death! I won't let myself drown in power! I won't lose myself!
Reminisce, as I said in my videos on it, is my favorite part of the series, as the lead woman of GU, Adalie, possesses a characterization that strikes very close to home. I've gotten into this elsewhere, but the scene where Adalie's breaking down after an intimate betrayal, and Haseo helping her with calm words piercing through to the core of her underlying depression and lacking self-esteem to bring her out of a self-destructive spiral, helps me get through some of the worst days of my life. And that would not have been made possible without the character arc Haseo's on, allowing him to become more empathetic. Because of Haseo's arc, there are two competing themes within this narrative as well. First, the more obvious grow up, one of many things the GU stands for, and how Haseo's early actions are that of an adolescent teenager learning to deal and cope with the realities of loss and learn to truly conceptualize its meaning, so he can open himself up to others again.
Screw you! Like I'm gonna trust you again!
And so, as you see, Haseo was the epitome of a typical teenager acting out.
Done with Shino being a person that Haseo had an attraction to due to Shino being one of the few people he ever remembers being close to.
These dual swords.
Hey, Haseo, do you know what those twin swords, honeysuckle, symbolize?
Symbolize? Devoted affection.
And the second of loss and identity, as Haseo is not the only character within this game to have lost something, and that absence having affected how said characters view themselves and interact with others. Just some short examples, and these are all ones revealed in the first game, so they're not really that spoilery for the endgame. For those familiar with the original era games and content, the character Endrance is Elk, and he was left traumatized by how Jotaro Amagi, an official from CC Corp which owns the world, came after Mia and murdered the AI that he loved right in front of him, leaving him stuck in mourning as he chases anything that takes Mia's image. Katsumi Tominari, whose coma set off the story of the Dot Hack Liminality OVA series originally packaged with the original 4 games, is the man behind Kun, and hides how he feels after having lost Liminality's protagonist Mai Minase after he was a bad boyfriend to her, and copes with said breakup by chasing the metaphorical skirts of the female player base, listlessly wandering in search of fulfillment. And overall, the world R2 is built upon a loss, that of the artificial intelligence Aura, who was a significant part of the first era storyline, who has since abandoned the realm that birthed her due to CC Corp's actions, and the entire backstory for the game within a game is showcasing a realm that no longer bears the power of a digital goddess, and the repercussions that come from that, which have actually caused the events which began this entire storyline. And as an aside, there's a lot of Dot Hack purists, yes, there's some in every fandom, out there that don't acknowledge anything past the first era, as it's focused on entirely new characters, and say the story isn't as good. On the contrary, on top of fixing many of the things that were wrong in the first quartet of games, I feel that it's overall the reverse, as it's more intimate in developing and continuing the stories neglected or left without resolution or development in the past material. Nuke, Usagi Maru, and Rachel, 2 party members from IMOC, are revealed to be successful comedians. Natsume and Pyros can be recruited as party members again, and there's one other original era character important to the storyline I'm not going to spoil here that has made something more of himself. But he's a man that's certainly wise. Almost every entry in the franchise focus on someone different than another. It's what kept it fresh instead of, say, the same jerk face we didn't like the first time, continuing to be shoved into the same situation again and again when their story should have ended long before that. Now, since news of this remaster first popped up, I seem to keep encountering the most caustic and vile parts of the fanbase that entirely miss the intent of this franchise, and, in example, want to punch the cinnamon roll too perfect for this earth that is Chigusa Adeli Kusaka, despite her winning the 15th anniversary popularity poll in the women's category. So, what do I know? Maybe I'm just refuting a minority opinion held by idiots and trolls. Now, if it seems like you're going to be hit over the head with a lot of, you must know this from having watched and played the prior material for this to make sense, moments, well, Dot Hack as a franchise is good about avoiding the continuity lockout problem with the crafting of its stories. Any entry in the franchise can be enjoyed and understood without any prior knowledge. Having experience with it only expands your perspective on events, but is not reliant on it, so each entry is ultimately self-contained. And the important parts carried over are addressed. Admittedly, some of the entries, when you bring in expanded knowledge on them, then become problematic. Link especially suffers from this. but those were also problematic before that knowledge comes into play. The only significant situation of, you need previous knowledge to get this, present in GU, is the character of Shino herself. Despite her salvation being the driving force behind Haseo's journey, GU itself did not originally address her character, that having been left for the anime prequel .hack Roots. If you've not seen my hour-and-a-half long rant on that anime, well, Roots screwed up being a prequel to GU's story worse than the Star Wars prequels. And for context, I went to high school with Jake Lloyd, and firsthand saw the abuse he took for playing Anakin Skywalker in Star Wars Episode 1, and yet still feel Roots is more damaging to the story of GU, as it misrepresents the carried-over characters and contradicts the few moments in the main game series that look back on the time Roots was supposed to depict, despite the GU games being in development for far longer than the anime. The reason being that Roots was not written by GU's head writer, Tatsuya Hamazaki, and thus spent more time focused on and being about characters that did not matter to the story of GU, and what would be carried on into the game series wasn't properly set up or explored. Thus, the Roots-only characters felt like self-inserted protagonists distracting from what we should be caring about, and not helped at all by Roots' atrocious pacing. Jar Jar Binks in Catgirl form. That is not hyperbole, and the show spends the most time focused on her. Because of this, Shino in that anime was mischaracterized as manipulating Haseo's affection for her to fill a void in herself from not being able to be with Ovan, someone she in turn actually is attracted to, and that not being how their interactions read in the material outside of Roots. However, this remaster fixes that. Several of the flashback scenes have been re-edited to more showcase events Roots was supposed to, but never actually contained. As a result, while this is not a complete fix, you get a better idea of both her character and their relationship as friends, and why her loss would motivate Haseo as it did, and removes the necessity of seeing Roots, as Shino herself is intended as a cipher, a stand-in representation for anything, anyone we've lost, that we wish we could have back, and yet must learn to let go of. This represented in the storyline by Haseo never having his affections for her returned, and he moves on from that.
I saw it all. Everything. Now be honest with yourself.
Though if you feel compelled that you must watch Roots, much in the same vein as the Star Wars movies, I recommend you machete order it, and that you play Rebirth and Reminisce to their completion, then watch Roots, then play Redemption. Roots also gives spoilers for Rebirth and Reminisce's storyline, and this way avoids the most significant spoilers, and you're allowed to see the characters as they were intended before they go off the rails. As the ultimate consensus among fans I've talked to on this is Roots' events happened in our canon, just not in the way Roots depicted. Though another way GU originally tried to mediate the continuity lockout problem is a differing prequel OVA known as the Terminal Disc, a primer on the first era of the series and how actions between those events and the main storyline affected and impacted these developments. Originally, the Terminal Disc was only available if you bought the special edition of Rebirth, and in the last few years, these have become ridiculously expensive. Even the one I got in this less than stellar damaged packaging shape was over $100. However, Last Recode includes the Terminal Disc content as part of its base package, and all of it is remastered in 1080p. Though, admittedly, like many others, I don't like how it's been letterboxed in there to make the footage ultimately smaller. Most of the out-of-game animated movies seen in the game, like the news articles, have much the same problem. While they redesigned the interface to be in widescreen format without entirely rebuilding it, the problem of that is they didn't properly scale all of it. I'm not certain why they did it that way, as it's not like GU in its original PS2 version was standard definition input only. My widescreen PS2 setting footage isn't that different from the remasters. Whereas there is a significant difference with everything you can access in the in-game desktop here, where it's much more zoomed out to preserve an aspect ratio. It's one of the few problems with this release, really. Though nonetheless, the visual acuity improvements are much appreciated, as they allow us to clearly see things we couldn't, or at least I did not make out before. One of the big ones is in the introductory scene of Sakaki, a man that purportedly is seeking to fight the menace of PKs, but in the scene where we first see him, is harassing Haseo, a PKK, for fighting player killers. When right by them are Asta and Ioten, two player killers notorious for attacking first-time players to make them quit, and had previously been the ones to almost make Haseo do that. He is talking down to someone who helps people, even if it's to his own ends, instead of calling out people who are actually harmful to the player base. It's almost as if his purported crusade is just a way to amass personal power into a cult of personality or something. This just further informs the hypocrisy of the character and a consistency about him and how monstrous he is, not spoiling that, but trust me, he is, that now can be seen to exist from the literal first moment he appears. His characterization is one of the most consistent throughout the entire trilogy, if you're actually paying attention. Honestly though, from the perspective of a remaster, this is one of the best I've seen. GU, for its time, already outclassed a number of PS3 and Xbox 360 games released at the same time with regards to its visual design. This remaster just cleans it up to look just as great, and the battle system has been improved as well. You learn skills through constantly using them, but in the original PS2 version, it took forever for them to level up at all. This has been rebalanced here to move at a much more even pace. Though you'll still be constantly trading with the NPCs Hanako and Corporal Yano for the beginner's text and beginner's book, which gives you free levels of those skills and can be acquired from those NPCs only in Rebirth. If you're going to trade for them though, stock up on a lot of equipment customization items. Those are the best trade bait for those NPCs. Sakubo, a character played by two differing persona, now can be called upon as either Saku or Bo, depending on who you'd want in the party at the time. And this actually changes how a few events read. Late in Reminisce, you can acquire a special weapon for them, and the scene changes depending on who is in control. I think they did before, but it was pretty inconsistent who was in control when. Now though, you can control when you see the scene, and who with if you don't mind a save reset. And speaking of those weapons, their upgrades and redemption are now far more balanced. They require you to farm virus cores to upgrade, but you can only farm them in redemption, and they drop at a pitifully low rate. So you could complete the entire volume and still not have enough to have upgraded even half of them originally. Now, it only takes 50 virus cores each, 350 total, which, while still a lot and you won't be completing that until Redemption's postgame, is not as ridiculous like it was before. And the values of items you can hold has been immensely increased across the board. And the last of the new content that's not reconnection is parody mode. A lot of the .hack media has play modes or content that entirely make fun of their own material, and GU originally was seemingly lacking that. Unless you bought the film adaptation .hack GU Trilogy, which I have gone on record as saying is one of the 3 greatest film adaptations of a video game. Yes, there are good ones. Japan has done several, and this is one of them. But honestly, the majority of these are laugh-worthy.
The Cyber Knight! Ranger! Wait, what'd you say?
Be it some scenes that you almost think could be canon, just not in the way showcased.
Kaoru? You go to that temp agency today, you hear me?
Yeah.
Don't yeah me!
One that alludes to the true backstory of the character that's not addressed, but is still canon, and they do eventually regain the ability to remember.
When I was little, I joined online games because I was lonely. I ended all my sentences with boing. I attacked people from behind and begged for their member addresses.
And others that allude to the next game in the series, that is also the worst game in the series.
If games keep advancing the way they are, do you think we'll use our actual bodies in them someday? Disco!
The World Division X の幕穴じゃないか!
Our friends are all turned to stone, and we save them and team up with the hackers and the surviving Ida.
これは?
知性と NPC の記憶を持った全く新しい人格。
した愛だ。それが私ですの。
Omufaga?
Well, fine then. Let's bet on it.
Fine. If I lose, I'll take my shirt off and pose for the logo of a mobile game.
And hell, a bit of satire and modern things that .hack didn't foresee happening, as otherwise they were actually pretty damn good at predicting the future in this game if you read the in-game news articles.
I still want to feel until the end of time the gentle, loving touch of your hands on my face.
While a few of the jokes are cringeworthy, they're mostly fun stuff. And I could go down a list of other little things they fixed, improved, or added, but unfortunately this is not a perfect remaster or product, and new issues have popped up. Yeah, a bunch of translation issues still exist, and as showed, there are new ones. Oka from Legend of the Twilight, when she's mentioned in the forum posts, is now written as Hoka, which is against the kana used to spell her name. The Arena Emperor in Volumes 1 through 3 are referred to as Arena Champions in Volume 4, though that inconsistency is accounted for by them being referred to as Arena Champions in the Japanese version, and that being changed for the international release, and the two are considered synonymous contextually. And the series theme song, Gentle Hands, is written in the credits and all over the material now as Kind Hands, when it wasn't before, and that actually acts in contradiction to the official translation of the lyrics in the English version of the song Lien produced, which has ended up confusing people online. And that one becomes even more irksome with said parody mode video of Yuri Lowenthal and Jameson Price badly singing said official English version of the song in character, where they still use gentle for what they're now saying should be translated as kind.
What should I do? Should I call the boss? Stay and fix it, is what he'll say. Well, I saw nothing.
They also didn't fix Hokuto's email to Rena, whose name is still mistranslated as Lena, as Hokuto's message still refers to Abario from .hack AI Buster as a woman in that message, when Kazushi Watarai is most definitely a man. Though I am happy they auto-enabled receipt of those previously save-importing emails, since they're lingering storyline aspects from the previous era, which GU was very good at seeding amidst its story. And if you're familiar enough with the material, you can figure out who Hokuto was talking about anyways, even with this continuing error. I just feel a bit more irritated about this one than many of the others, as I really like AI Buster. Fortunately, they did fix this subtitle scripting error, where a line in one cutscene was somehow overriding sections of dialogue all over Redemption, an error that was frustrating as it removed context to what was being said for anyone deaf. So really, it's all pluses and minuses. Nothing here is made unintelligible, like I cited with how god-awful Namco Bandai's translation of the PS4 Digimon games have been, meaning Last Recode ultimately is the definitive release of this game, and Cyberconnect's best game back at the fore. So, this is the point where I'm going to get a bit into my initial thoughts on Volume 4 Reconnection, the new content no one expected to ever happen for this remaster. And they tried. Okay, let me be honest, it's half-baked at best. It did not have the time or length devoted to it to make it notable, or to justify and explain its story points, which I really feel it needed to validate it beyond one last hurrah and closing the book on these people forever. And I feel that's a result of it being thrown together in what I presume to be the last 6 months, since the first time we heard of Last Recode and this new edition coincided exactly with when Cyberconnect was removed from the Final Fantasy VII Remaster project, which I still feel is going to blow up in Square Enix's face eventually. That said, it's not something worth burning the goodwill of fans like, say, Final Fantasy has so frequently done the last decade. Looking at you, Final Fantasy X audio dramas, and the entire 13 trilogy that are still the worst RPGs I have ever played. And I feel more of Reconnection would have made sense to me with a translation of Innocent Call's script, meaning I really wish that Namco Bandai had actually imported the premium edition, as while all of the story points are there to make this final story feasible, much like Roots, the characters are off. Similar to themselves, but don't seem as if it's a natural development from the 15-month time skip, likely due to this not being written by Tatsuya Hamazaki. And there's just a bit too much hand-waving of story points meant to progress things forward to my liking. Sure, there's cool stuff in here, and it does manage to give closure to many of the main cast, which was one of my critiques of Redemption, that it didn't do such by its end. But at the end of it, I just felt like it was superfluous fluff, as while I went into it with an open mind, I didn't feel satisfied with it. I mean, I wasn't expecting overt Haseo Adderley ship confirmation. I've got Trilogy, GU+, the Link side stories, and in-real-life event transcripts which have the staff confirming it happens for that, but just something more than what we were given. I haven't pinned down quite what, and I hope to do so before I do a formal review of it, as it isn't terrible. Though, before we wrap up, let me give a few pointers to newer players to make their playthrough a bit easier. This is a chart of where and when you can find lucky animals. This chart is also available on the .hack wiki. Finding all the lucky animals gives up rare items gear. In Reminiscent Redemption, if you're having difficulty clearing the bike missions, push down on the touchpad before you hit a King Chim Chim. The game glitches so you max out the kings and clear it early. This is a hack retained from the PS2 version. Each course gives you a wealth of items for clearing them and allow you to customize your incredibly awesome Steam bike. The area words Delta, Elegant, Swift, Berserker make for an excellent location to farm battles with player killers in Rebirth and Reminisce, immensely speeding up the super powerful rare gear you get from the quest giver Dingo. In Redemption, switch to the area Sigma Buzzing Cursed Berserker, as there you can farm PKs, lucky animal encounters, and also Mecha Grunty right off from where you warp in. These battles are important, as you need to defeat all 7 chaotic player killers in each volume, 21 chaotic PK matches total, to unlock Natsume the Edge Maniac as a party member. It's a lot of work, but it is worth it. Mecha Grunty requires you to constantly give him Chim Spheres as you encounter him. He can be farmed alongside the PK battles or as you pass him, but again is a campaign that needs to be completed to unlock a mission in Redemption that is one of the most dramatic, tear-jerking finales in this series. If you do Beekman's Quest, I know it's insufferable and the only bad side quest, but they made an achievement out of it. Don't forget about finding the Medic Union in random areas. Delta starting your shadow has a good chance of you warping in right in front of them. Just make sure before you warp there that there are 4 or more NPCs present on the area data screen. Doppelganger. This thing is immensely important to fight, and fight repeatedly. Once in Rebirth, twice in Reminisce, and at least 3 times in Redemption. Go to a randomly generated area that is not one you've bookmarked, preferably one that has a Sleipnir lucky animal in it. Clear it out, kick Sleipnir, wait 5 minutes, and then wander until you find a shadow-like version of Haseo. That's the Doppelganger. Engage it, let Sleipnir weaken it, use a smoke screen to escape the battle, and enter it again. Repeat this until Sleipnir's use is depleted, then use a Demon Awakening to just freely spam magic attacks to kill it. This works in every Doppelganger encounter, and is a strategy to be used if you find you can't beat them in later combat, which you should not be able to, as they are always 8 levels above you. Doppelganger gives up the most powerful equipment in each volume, but only if you keep fighting it, as each of the key items it drops in each volume add up and allow you to access the next game's gear, and it can't get all of the gear or the best gear if you skip any of those encounters. The Abyss Quest. This is again easy to screw up, but all you need to do is continue to check the community forums. Every now and then you'll find a flag about someone finding an odd area with something the player can't do. You ask for the area words, go to the given area, and then find that Haseo can complete it. Each of these rumor quest chains leads to the post-game boss of each volume, and build upon each other, and they are all part of the same event chain that is the normal storyline quest of the World R2. If you miss one of these, you miss them all, and thus lose out on accessing the final post-game dungeon of Redemption and any chance to complete the game. As if you avoid doing them, you lose out on expansions to your own guild, and are thus left at an ever-mounting disadvantage in the following entries. .hack as a franchise is one that rewards you for doing everything in them, and does not seek to make anything you do obnoxiously tedious. But overall, Last Recode is nothing short of a dream for me, and I enjoyed immensely the time I had coming back to do literally everything perfectly before putting this video together. And if this were to be the last .hack material Cyberconnect makes, I would be happy. I'd like the original games on the PSN or Steam like a lot of .hack fans, since it's almost impossible to find them now if you didn't keep your collection of them before. But if you're done with any further expansions to it, this is a good place to stop. However, Cyberconnect head Hiroshi Matsuyama has teased that just might not be the case. In a few interviews, he has made mention that if Last Recode does well enough in sales, well, it may end up showing the .hack property is still viable for new content. Whether he's referring to an additional re-release or full-on remaster of the core games, or an entirely new project is unknown at this point. But honestly, I'd be up for whatever. And I hope anyone still on the fence about getting it would be enticed at the idea of more .hack content, since the niche it is in has so exploded into the mainstream. So, in the event .hack possibly could continue on from this, here's a few things I'd like to see in a new game. Number 1, PlayStation VR compatibility. As they use the VR goggle in series and inspired modern VR technology, this one is obvious. 2, customizable characters. Fragment had it, weapon variants always show up, but I'd like it if you would expand that into showing at the very least accessory items or some equipment modding for the special gears you gather. Plus, the option to play as someone that's not a dual wielder would be appreciated. Number 3, online cooperative play. Not a full-blown MMO, but something like the Dragon Ball Xenoverse games where you have places or ways to interact with other real players. Maybe give the option to go through dungeons or replay story events in a party with players visiting those sections. Not unlike Fragment allowed you to do. The option for online play in a game that otherwise can be played solo. Number 4, airships. You teased it in Beyond the World. I was in a guild in Final Fantasy XIV that made use of one, and I loved every single thing about the steam bike. I feel it could be done, depending on how difficult it'd be in modern times to create an overworld using .hack's area word system, and flying around in a customizable airship would be immense fun. Number 5, legacy characters and callbacks. .hack has been good about showing how its cast continued on in their lives and past their entry's end with a variety of callbacks or promoting them to differing cast positions in successive entries, and I'd like to see that continue. You left the door open for Kennard to continue as an ongoing guild repeatedly, and for most of the GU cast to have some relevance or involvement following this. I'd like the option to gain access to a library of them in a way that would fit a continuance of their stories and lives. As every time I revisit the best stories in this franchise, I fall in love with it all over again. I really do feel .hack GU is worth your time, and my shameless plugging of this franchise has got you into this content if you weren't already. But while I could easily end this all here, just finish up the new endpoint of my retrospective with the Innocent Call audio drama, once it gets translated, and Reconnection early next year, that wouldn't be the best way to go about this. No, GU is the best storyline the series has produced hands down, and nothing made sense has even tried to measure up, but it wasn't the only storyline worth attention, and it was built upon previous material that should be seen, respected, as it is just as much beloved and worthy of that love. As everyone's likely aware, as I've seen the comments of the people that haven't gotten the memo about them all being on my Daily Motion page, my reviews of the first era .hack content are non-existent on YouTube, due to YouTube's content ID system constantly flagging them, so I can't put them on the platform. And frankly, they are so old and so poorly performed by myself and my experience with video reviewing, and my way of addressing this material has changed so much over the years, I overall dislike those videos now. They're up on Dailymotion simply for the sake of having the videos exist somewhere. However, for anyone new around here and wants to learn more about the franchise, that is going to change. For I have obtained a backwards compatible PS3. Next year, 2018, I'm bringing it back from the beginning. Dadak Retrospective Remastered Edition. Newly recorded, freshly edited from scratch, with new additions, alterations, and revisions to the scripts, with new information, commentary, and snark I didn't think of before. Recorded in as high a visual quality as I can get it. And new episodes discussing content I didn't before, such as .hack Fragment and .hack Enemy, as I can actually make content discussing those now. And alongside it, .hack Replay, a digital archiving of footage from the original 4 games for anyone who may discover the series in the future, so they can witness it in full. Don't call it a comeback, as we never left! But in the meantime, I hope this has interested you all to pick up .hack GU Last Recode this holiday season. Available now for the PlayStation 4 and on Steam. I'm Des Shinta, and I welcome you all to the world.
冷たい手に引き寄せられ流れてゆく時を過ごし遠くを見たその瞳に何が映っているのだろう月が照らす冷たい指にこぼれたのが冷たい涙見上げた空いつかの夢が遠くで見つめている
やはり私は